Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom has a brand new release that's all about cocoa and candy canes. Jaded Blossom's final release for 2023 is now available and it's so cute. Here's a quick look at everything that's in the release, and I do have a link in the description box for all of the items in the new release. I'll start with the freebie. This is a Gnome die add-on set called Ice Skate. This set is currently not available for individual purchase. You'll receive it free with a $60 purchase. One item has to be from the new release. This is while supplies last and for a limited time. The first stamp set is a sentiment set called Hot Cocoa Bar. Lots of really fun sentiments that you can combine with Jaded Blossom's Build-A-Booth die set. The next stamp set is called Hot Cocoa Season. There's stamps and coordinating outline dies. I love the variety of sentiments. There are a couple of Christmas sentiments and the rest are more hot cocoa themed. And it's always nice to have the coordinating outline dies to cut out the sentiments. Now moving on to all the fun new die sets. The first one is a Build-A-Booth add-on set called Hot Cocoa. There are several different buntings you can use to decorate your booth. We have candy canes, marshmallows, and mugs of hot cocoa. There's also some larger candy canes, and if you put the two together, you can create a cute candy cane heart. I think that would be fun to use for a Valentine's Day card. I think candy canes still work for Valentine's Day. The next item is a Gnome die set add-on. This is also called Hot Cocoa. There's a fun new hat with stripes, several different glasses and mugs you could add your hot cocoa in. There's also the candy canes that form a heart, or you can use them individually. The snowman mug is super cute, and there's even a tiny carrot for its nose. There's a second Build-A-Booth add-on set called Winter. I love this set. There are several different buntings. There's one with hats and mittens, snowflakes, pine cones. There's also an icicle piece you can put at the top of your booth. There are several different snow piles and even a stack of snowballs. There are two stencil sets this month. The first one is Peppermint Stencil, and there are 3 pieces. You'll have the 2 different layers for the candy and 1 for the wrapper. Super cute design with all the fun peppermint candies. The second stencil is called Pinecone Stencil. There are 2 pieces, one for the foliage and the other for the pine cones. And I love this beautiful design. I do have some cards to share with you using the new release. For most of the cards, the pattern paper I'm using is from Catherine Pooler. This is the Through the Woods collection. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. I will be using a card sketch for inspiration. This is from Sweet Sunday, number 204. This sketch is designed to be horizontal, but I'm flipping my card vertical. For the background of my card, selected this fun snowflake in tan pattern paper. For the 3 narrow strips, I'm using the red and tan stripe paper. For the image box, I have some white shimmer cardstock, layering everything on some red cardstock. And the red cardstock I'm using for my cards in this video is Basil's Wax Lips color. The red matches beautifully with the pattern paper. I'll layer the background piece on red cardstock, put ATG tape on the back, and add my card front onto a card base. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. Now it's time to assemble one of the gnomes. This is a boy gnome, and he has one of the brand new beards that was just released last month. For the background piece of the gnome, I use white cardstock, and all of that will be covered up. For the boy gnomes, I always adhere the beards down first, then I add the hat. For the hat, I used red cardstock for the background piece and some dark brown cardstock for that top layer. I'll adhere the two pieces together, then add the hat on the outline piece. And since the new hat is the same size as the traditional gnome hat, I don't have to do any trimming of that background piece. Next, I'll add the mustache. I'll adhere it down using some glue. I will pop up the nose using some thin foam dimension. The small foam squares fit nicely behind the nose with one cut in half. I'll also add a foam square where the little foot stubs are. I'll remove the release paper and add the nose right above the mustache. Next, I'll adhere the feet, and I decided this gnome would have bare feet. There are shoes, but I love the bare feet for the gnomes. The gnome will be holding the snowman mug. For the background piece, I use white cardstock. White cardstock for the main snowman portion of the mug. He's wearing a red scarf, orange for his carrot nose, and for the whipped cream, I'm using a tan pearlescent cardstock, since this is a chocolate flavored whipped cream. Next, I'll attach the hands, one on the handle and the other on the side of the mug. I'll flip over the snowman mug, put foam dimension on the back. Behind the mug, I'm using thin foam dimension, and behind the hands, I'm using some slightly thicker foam dimension. That way it stays at the same level. I'll remove the release paper and adhere the mug in front of the gnome. For the sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. All you need is gnomes and cocoa. Using the outline die, I cut out a second piece. I use more of the tan pearlescent cardstock. I'll layer the two pieces together, creating a drop shadow underneath the sentiment. Now I'll flip it over, put foam dimension on the back. I'm using scrapbook.com's 1mm thickness foam. The sentiment will go underneath the gnome. I'll first place it on the card, put glue on the back of the gnome and adhere him in place. Then I'll remove the release paper and add the sentiment underneath the gnome. I love all these colors together, perfect for a winter card. And this new beard for the gnome with the curly hair is one of my favorites. For embellishments, I'm following the design of the card sketch and putting two pearls on the right-hand side. The pearls are from Studio Katia. It's the wine berry pearl color, and it matches beautifully with the red paper. To finish off the card, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights to the gnome and also the mug. Overall, my card design is very simple, but it's perfect for featuring the adorable gnome. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 1. And I know I generally make 2 of all of my gnome cards, but since December is super busy, I'm only making 1 of each this time. Now moving on to card number 2. I selected this fun plaid paper for the background, reds, cream, and browns. I'll layer it first on some dark brown cardstock, then again on some red cardstock. I'm adding a 1.5 inch strip across the card, more toward the bottom. For the image box, I'll be using an Octagon die cut. Before adhering that down, I'm adding a Love from Lizzie peel off along the edge of the red strip. This is the brown color with gold overlay. I'm using the medium width. I'll put 1 strip at the very bottom, and on that top portion of this strip, I'm using some of the small scraps since the center will be covered up with the Octagon. I'll wrap the ends around the back, put ATG tape on the back, and add my card front onto a card base. Next, I'll add the Octagon die cut, put glue on the back, and adhere it in place. And I did use some white shimmer cardstock for the Octagon. I've already assembled a little girl gnome, and she's holding the candy cane heart. I used some of the pattern paper for her hat and also the dress, and she has one of the new hairstyles that was just released last month. I did pop up the gnome using some foam dimension. I've already stamped out the sentiment, Happy Peppermint Season. The sentiment is from Jaded Blossom's Peppermint Season stamp set, and I stamped it on one of their label die cuts. I did pop up the sentiment with some foam dimension. I'll adhere it at the bottom of the hexagon. Next, I'll add a couple of snowflake die cuts, and these are from Jaded Blossom's Winter die set. Put one in the upper left-hand corner and one on the right side of the gnome. In the center of the snowflakes, I'm adding some bling. This is from Studio Katia. It's their Icy Sparkle Crystals. I was trying to decide which size of the crystals I want inside the snowflakes. I'll add a small drop of Barely Art glue, use an embellishment wand to pick up the crystals, then press them in place. And I'll also add 2 crystals next to the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 2. I love how the 2 candy canes together form a heart. So sweet. Now moving on to card number 3. I cut out the main booth from some pattern paper, and I want to add just a little extra color to the edge. I'm using Catherine Pooler's Sand Castle ink color. I have the die cut in a mini stencil mat from Waffle Flower, and I'm adding just a very light amount of brown ink along the edges of the booth. The Build a Booth die set also has the pieces for individual boards on the booth, but sometimes it's fun to cut out the booth from some wood grain pattern paper. For the background of my card, using more of the snowflake pattern paper with the tan background. This is one of my favorite pattern papers in the whole collection. I will pop up the booth using some foam dimension. This is scrapbook.com's 1mm thickness foam. I'll remove the release paper, and I was ready to add the booth on the card. Remembered I wanted to put a strip of white cardstock at the very bottom. Generally, when I use the booth dies, I create a scene background. So for this card, I'm adding some snow at the bottom. Other booths, I've put a strip of green at the bottom for grass. Now I'll adhere the booth on the card. The booth set is fairly large, but it does fit nicely on an A2 size card. And they also have a treat box that you can put behind the booth. So instead of adding the booth on a card, you can create a cute little box. If you're ever wondering how to assemble a Jaded Blossom die set, you can always check out my Jaded Blossom playlist on YouTube. I have almost 50 videos, so I may have used that product. You can also head over to Jaded Blossom's YouTube channel. Leanne does their videos over there, and she does an amazing job showing how to use all the different sets. I've already gone ahead and cut out all of the die cut pieces to decorate the booth. I put the icicle piece at the very top of the booth. Now I'm assembling the pine cone bunting piece. I cut out the string piece from some light pink cardstock, and I'm gluing down all 5 of the pine cones. Now I'll put glue on the back and add the bunting piece at the bottom of the booth. Next, I'll add the 2 piles of snow, putting them at the very bottom of the booth. I'll adhere both of those in place with some glue. I've already stamped out the sentiment, Snowballs for Sale. The stitched rectangle die for the sentiment is part of the original Build-A-Booth die set. Before adhering the sentiment, I'm adding a little stack of snowballs. For all of the snow pieces except the snowflakes, I used some white shimmer cardstock. The snowflakes I cut out from white glitter paper. We'll put some foam dimension on the back of the snowball stack. Remove the release paper, putting just a tiny bit of glue at the very bottom of the stack where it sits on the edge of the booth. Now I'll put foam dimension on the back of the sentiment, and I'm using some slightly thicker foam dimension. This is from scrapbook.com. It's their 2mm thickness foam. I'll remove the release paper and adhere it underneath the very top portion of the booth. Now I'll add the glittery snowflakes. I'll add 2 in the upper left-hand corner and 1 on the right side of the booth. I thought about adding one of the crystals inside the snowflakes, but changed my mind. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 3. I love the soft colors on this card. It's very different from my first 2 cards with the bright red and brown colors. Now moving on to card number 4. The pattern paper I used for this card is from Creative Expressions. It's their Vintage Textures Candy Clouds collection. I used it for the background of the card and also the little girl Gnome's outfit. I'm using the ice skate freebie die set. I've already assembled one of her ice skates. I use white cardstock for the background piece, pink cardstock for the ice skate boot, silver mirror cardstock for the blade, and some gray cardstock for the laces. Now I'll add the second ice skate on the leg piece. Now you can trim this piece in half if you want your gnome to stand. It is a little disturbing when you cut the leg piece in half, but once you tuck it behind the gnome's beard or the dress, depending on if it's a girl or a boy, the gnome looks really cute standing up. But this girl gnome will be doing the splits sitting on the ice. I have the outline piece of the girl gnome, and I did cut off the little foot stubs. I'll adhere her dress, put glue on the back side, and attach her body on the legs. Next, I'll add her face. I've already assembled the hat. This is from the winter add-on set that was released last year. I love the fun design, perfect for a winter card. Since the winter hat is not the same size as the traditional gnome hat, I did need to trim off the very top portion of that outline piece. I'll add the nose next, and I did pop it up with some foam dimension. I'm using one of the new hairstyles that was released last month. There's the wavy hair piece that goes behind the gnome, the two single wavy pieces that go in front. And before I adhere those single pieces, I'll first give the little girl a scarf. And the scarf is also from the winter add-on set. I'm also adding some cute little pigtails that are coming out of the top of her hat. I think these are just adorable. I'll add just a little bit of glue at the tip of the pigtails, then adhere them on the hat. The girl gnome will be holding a large cup of cocoa. I use white cardstock for the background piece, a bright blue cardstock for the mug, white shimmer cardstock for the whipped cream, and I'm also adding the chocolate dripping down the side of the mug. The chocolate dripping die cut piece is such a fun detail. I'll attach her hands, one on the left side of the mug and one holding the handle. I'll flip it over, put foam dimension on the back, using thin foam dimension behind the mug and the whipped cream, and some slightly thicker foam dimension behind her hands. I'll remove the release paper and add the mug in front of the girl. And this is a very large mug for her. It should keep her nice and warm while she's sitting on the ice. I will be popping up the gnome with some foam dimension. I'll flip her over, put thin foam dimension on the back side. I did cut some of the foam squares in half to fit behind her boots and legs. I'll remove the release paper. At first I planned on putting the gnome in the very center of the card, but I realized there wouldn't be enough space for the sentiment, so I'll have her more on the right side. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, Hot Cocoa Season. Using the outline die, I cut out a second piece. I used the same blue cardstock as her mug, glued the two pieces together so I have that blue drop shadow underneath the sentiment. And I'll adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. I almost forgot to add some bows at the end of her pigtails. I cut these out from some pink satin mirror cardstock. I'll just glue them in place. I think the little bows really finish off the look. Using the snowflake dies that are in the Build-A-Booth winter add-on set, I cut out 6 snowflakes, used some white shimmer cardstock, and I'll adhere them all around the background so it looks like a snowy sky. I'll put 3 of the snowflakes on the right side of the gnome and 3 on the left side underneath the sentiment. Since I am using shimmer cardstock, it does take just a little bit longer for the glue to adhere. But once it dries, those snowflakes aren't going anywhere. For a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add highlights to the gnome and also the mug of cocoa. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 4. I love how this card turned out. The little girl with skates is absolutely adorable. Now moving on to card number 5. This card is featuring another booth. Just to save time on this video, I've already assembled it and adhered it to a background. I use more of the snowflake pattern paper, put the strip of white cardstock at the bottom for snow. To decorate the booth, I'm adding the bunting with the mugs of cocoa. I've already assembled most of them. I use dark brown cardstock for the bunting string, and I'm alternating colors of the mug, red and also light pink. I use white glitter paper for the whipped cream. For a sentiment, I've already stamped out hot cocoa, stamped it on some of the wood grain pattern paper, and I use Jaded Blossom's sign add-on die set. A brown cardstock for the background piece, just glue those two together, and I'll adhere it in the upper left-hand corner, putting the peak of this string so it looks like it's hanging off the nail. On the right side of the booth, I'm adding two hearts, one in red and one in pink, same colors as the mug. I'll be adding a girl gnome standing behind the booth. Since you'll only see the top portion of her body, I don't have to worry about adding her feet. I will put some foam dimension behind the gnome. I'll remove the release paper, put a little bit of glue at the bottom of her dress, and tuck her in behind the booth. The top of her hat will sit in front. Now I'll put glue on the back of the bunting piece and adhere it at the bottom of the booth. I decided to add the gnome's hands so it looks like she's holding the edge of the booth, just tucking them in underneath her hair. I always have to think about the placement, making sure I have the thumbs the right direction. For a little extra detail, I'll use a white gel pen, add highlights to the hearts, the gnome, and also the mugs of cocoa. Since my card doesn't have any specific sentiment, I think this would be perfect for a winter, Christmas, or even a Valentine's Day card. After the card sat there for a moment, I decided the mugs needed a little more decoration. I'm using Doodlebug Designs shape sprinkles, putting a white heart in the center of each of the 5 mugs. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 5. I love how this one turned out. The colors look so pretty together. For card number 6, I'll be using one of the new stencils. This is the Pinecone Stencil. I have a piece of craft cardstock in my mini stencil mat, and I'll tape down the pine cone layer first. The ink color I'm using is Icing on the Cake from Catherine Pooler. I love the design of this stencil, perfect for creating your own pattern paper. And this is a great design to use for winter, Christmas, or really any time of year cards. Most of the pine cones are about the same size, but there are a couple of tiny pine cones mixed in there. And the finished stencil design isn't direction specific. You will want to make sure to line up the 2 stencils correctly though. Once I finish with this stencil layer, I'll remove this stencil. Now I'll bring in the second layer, and this will add all of the leaves. The ink color is Spruce from Catherine Pooler. This is one of my favorite green ink colors, especially for winter or Christmas cards. And I think it looks so pretty on craft cardstock. The stencil size is 6 by 6 inches. And sometimes when I stencil, I just cut an 8.5 by 11 inch size of paper in half. Once I finish that layer, my favorite part, removing the stencil, and look at that beautiful design. I cut down this piece to 4 inches by 5.25 inches, and off screen I did add a white paint splatter all over the background so it looks like snow. Toward the bottom of the card, I'm adding 2 wavy border die cuts. These are from Jaded Blossom's border die set. I use some dark green cardstock. The die cuts are wider than this panel. I'll first adhere them down, then I'll flip over the panel, use my scissors to trim off the extra. That way they're flush to the right and left side. Now I'll layer this piece on some dark brown cardstock, put ATG tape on the back, and add my card front onto a card base. I did save some of the extra cutoff of the stencil background. Since it's just like pattern paper, I'll use that narrow strip and adhere it on the inside of the card just for some extra detail. I like to do that with pattern paper, and rather than just toss the extra stenciled area, I can use it the same way and decorate the inside of the card. I've already gone ahead and assembled a boy gnome. He's wearing a hat, and this is part of the winter add-on gnome set that was released last year. He also has one of the new beards that was released last month. I'll be adding him on a vellum hexagon. At the very bottom of the hexagon, I'm adding one of the snowdrift die cuts. I'll adhere that down with some glue, and I will pop up the gnome with some foam dimension. And sorry, I went a little off screen there for a moment. Now I'll flip over the hexagon, put glue on the back just behind the gnome and the snowdrift, and I'll adhere it on the card. Since I'm adding a sentiment at the very top, I will add a little bit of glue underneath the edge of the hexagon. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, Hello Winter. This is from Jaded Blossom's Winter is Gnoming stamp set along with the outline die. It was released last year and I love this sentiment. I'll put foam dimension on the back and adhere the sentiment at the top of the hexagon. The gnome will be holding a large snowflake, and this snowflake die is from the Gnome Winter add-on set that I've been using throughout this video. I'll also add a couple of the new snowflakes, put 2 on the left side of the gnome and 1 on the right side. Currently I don't have the right and left side of the hexagon attached to the card, but once I glue down the snowflakes, I'll lift up the hexagon and add just a tiny bit of glue behind the snowflakes, then hold it in place. That way all of the hexagon is adhered to the card. For a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights to my gnome. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 6. This is another favorite card. I love that beautiful Pinecone Stencil background. Now here's another look at the 6 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's brand new December 2023 release. This is an adorable release, lots of cocoa and candy canes. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. It's hard to believe we're coming to the end of 2023, and this is the final release for Jaded Blossom this year. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.